Hello, today I'm going to be talking about the whole issue with my daughter and her foot, the whole injury, I guess you would say. It was a wound on the bottom of her foot that would not heal, I think in summary. So if that's not something fun for you, then this whole video won't be fun at all, because I will be talking about, the whole situation with her foot. But if you are new here, hello, my name's Armida. I am a mother of a beautiful toddler named Marceline. About right now, she's like a year and a half, so to say, and this whole story took place the past couple months, honestly. I think it goes all the way back till I think April, and we're in June now. But it's a pretty extensive story, and I wanted to talk about it, but it's too long of a story to just sprinkle it in one of my everyday vlogs that I have with Marceline. So I was like, you know what, I'll just sit down, I'll just tell you about it. So get a cup of coffee or something. I did have a coffee at one point, but in setting up for this, it is gone. Look at that, it's completely gone. So I guess I'll just stick with water, which is a good idea anyway. But yeah, just to clarify, everything is resolved, everything is finished, it is done. With the foot situation, I would not feel comfortable sharing this much about it unless it was resolved. No, this is just something that very odd happened with her foot. Nobody could figure out what it was for a hot sec, and it was not healing, so it was just an ongoing thing. But it's resolved now, so if you're on the edge of your seat oh my gosh, is Marceline okay? She's fine. She's definitely better now than she did when she had a wound in her foot. Just so you know, everything's okay now. That's why I'm gonna talk about it today. So yes, this goes all the way back to I think sometime in April. We noticed on the bottom of her right foot, she had a reddish bump. It wasn't something was stuck in her skin. It was just her body had made a red bump, and it was on the bottom of her foot. And this, of course, this was right after we had already seen her pediatrician for her 16-month appointment, or maybe 15-month appointment, whichever checkup that it was around that time. We had already seen her doctor, but it didn't seem to really bug her, and you could just tell by feeling it there wasn't something in her foot, almost her body was callousing it. It was a thick amount of skin on the bottom of her foot, of course right on the part of her foot where she is stepping, so it's not it was on the bottom of her foot where it's not a very prominent area for you to walk with. So we're okay, so the plan was we were going to just bring it up to her doctor at her 18-month checkup. We'll just see what they say about that. But at the end of April, specifically on April 29th, the spot, it must have, during her bath, it must have soaked up water and loosened or the skin, because when we took her out of the bath on April 29th, there was a tiny bit of red blood in our the towels that we're using to dry her down. And so it took some investigating. Her foot was bleeding a tiny bit. I didn't even really look at it. I didn't think of it was a big deal at the time. In hindsight, of course, I should have taken pictures during all this preemptive time, but I thought it was just just a little something. We put a bandaid on it, and we thought that'd be fine. And so the next day, April 30th, by the time Krishna came home from work, I think we must have taken her socks off or something. And so we saw the Band-Aid, and it was still bleeding enough that you could see the blood through the Band-Aid. You know, when you look at a Band-Aid and the wound is still bleeding, you could see the blood, it was so we knew that it was bleeding enough still, almost a day, a full day later, that it was still bleeding. So we're oh, okay, but we didn't take off the Band-Aid. But then we were getting her ready for bath that night, April 30th, and she was walking around, and we could see blood. The Band-Aid had soaked through with blood, and she was leaving little bloody footprints around the apartment. Not a full footprint, but just as big as the Band-Aid was, just little spots around the apartment. And we're like, what? And so then we investigated, because it was like, oh, it's like actively bleeding now. It's officially 24 hours later from when it first started bleeding. And so we took off the Band-Aid. It is like soaked, you know, fully soaked with blood. Okay, let's see if I can describe the first thing that I saw. So looking at her foot, it was like as if someone hole punched a hole in her foot. So you know those like, those hole punchers where it punches a hole, like a circle, in it for paper mostly, like if you're like hole punching paper to, you know, put it in a binder or something, and so it's like a circle. So it's like as if someone hole punched the bottom of her foot, and there was like this white thing in the middle of the circle, and it was just surrounded by like an opening and like into her foot. That's what it looked like. So it was like just like a ring of this white thing surrounded by blood, like wound, you know, like going into her foot. My first instinct was that this white thing in the middle of like the hole punched hole was something to be removed. Like maybe we were wrong, and maybe she did step on something like maybe a month ago, and then now her body's rejecting it and it's coming off. So I attempted with just my hands. It was causing her pain, you know, because it's bleeding, it's soaking through, like she's bleeding so much that it's soaking through a Band-Aid, that it was this whole thing trying to grab her and hold her down to get to the bottom of her foot. You know, it's like, it's tough. It would be tough to like grab the bottom of my foot, you know, even if I let you, it'd be difficult to navigate that. But she was like fighting it, you know, I got this little toddler fighting it. Chris is holding her down. I am trying to remove the spot in the middle from her foot. I could not do it. Every time I touched the spot, just bunch of blood came out, just not pouring, but dripping out, like it was like an opening to her foot. And it was just like, every time I irritated it, it was just like blood just like dripping out. There was like I got so much blood on like my fingertips, and blood like smushed on me, and like drips on the floor. It was this big old thing, because I thought it was something to be removed. And so eventually I gave up. I was like, I can't do this anymore. Like she's in pain, she's yelling in pain, there's blood everywhere. If I can't just pull it out myself, then surely this is something beyond my medical expertise, obviously, and it's like causing her pain. In that moment, we decided to take her to urgent care. We're like, it was late at night, it was like 8 p.m. We're like, okay, let's take her to, like, I think this is something to be removed, but maybe it's more advanced than I can just do myself here at home. And it's obviously causing her pain, there's blood everywhere. Take her to urgent care, because it was the only thing opened, and we wouldn't be able to call her doctor, her pediatrician, until the next morning. And so this felt like something to, you know, take care of that day. So we took her to urgent care. I think by this point it was like 9 p.m. Eventually, by the time we got to see someone, of course, the first thing they ask, you know, at urgent care, I think we got to see a nurse, was like, oh, does she walk around barefoot? At home, yes. But if she is outside of a house, she's wearing shoes, wearing socks and shoes, going to the car, around my parents' backyard, she's wearing shoes. I think even at, you know, my in-laws' house, I think she wears shoes just to be safe anyway. So yeah, the first thing anyone asked was like, oh, they immediately thought it was something that lodged its way into her foot. And I was like, no way this could be. The only thing I could think of was that if it was like a piece of litter, like kitty litter, because we have like rocks. It's almost like really tiny rocks that soak up, you know, the kitty's pee and poop, you know, that's what litter is. And so the only thing I think of was like, maybe she stepped in like a larger piece of litter and that's what this is, but there'd be no reason why I couldn't have just removed it from her foot. So at urgent care, so, you know, they're like, okay, they went to investigate it, and they really cleaned it up. They did a great job of like really cleaning it up, because it's like dripping blood at this point. I told them it's like an open wound. And she investigated it, and then the nurse did try to remove it more professionally than I did, obviously. And yeah, it would not budge, pouring out blood, just, you know, on the little table that she's sitting on. And, you know, I'm holding Marceline. There's this whole thing. I think I even took a video while we were waiting. Look at this baby. With the foot. Yeah, getting blood all over me. Say hi to baby. Hi, baby. You're lucky. Usually you get the lollipops after the appointment. At my doctor's office, we got stickers. Where I was holding her, and so that, you know, I could comfort her and hold her down so that the nurse can like really investigate her foot. It was this big old thing. Yeah, it would not budge. She said to call her pediatrician the next morning, because it's late at night by this point, and to see if they could recommend Marceline to a dermatologist, like I think a skin doctor, to surgically remove this, which she thought it was a piece of fat from her foot poking out through the skin, and it was just always been like that, and that her skin could not, like, it was like protruding so much out that her skin could not heal, you know, outside of it. So she thought it was a piece of fat, and that the Marceline needed to see a dermatologist, a skin doctor, to like surgically put Marceline under and surgically remove it, is what her first thought was. So we're like, okay, I do think that's more likely than it being a foreign thing that she stepped on and getting stuck in her foot. So it felt really defeating going to urgent care because they ended up not doing anything to help. It was still an open wound. They literally slapped a bandaid on it after that, and we had to still call our pediatrician the next morning anyway. So that was a copay that we had to pay right immediately. So next morning, call her pediatrician's office, and I'm like, please, can we see her doctor, her specific doctor, as soon as possible, like today, because she has an open wound on her foot. We took her to urgent care last night, told them the whole story, and they were like, okay, like open wound on her foot, you know, that sounds a little intense. So they were like, you can't see her doctor today, but we can get you in to see a different doctor. So we're like, okay, we'll see anybody at this point. We don't really need to have that history with her pediatrician anyway. So we just need to see someone. So I think this is May 1st by this point. So we go in like an hour after I called, because that's how soon it was. We get to see doctor number 2, you know, at the pediatrician office. He just kind of like takes a look at it. He asks the same question about like, oh, does she walk around barefoot? We're like, no. And he's like, okay, I'm gonna recommend you to a foot doctor. I think specifically he was like a foot surgeon, a foot doctor, so that he can rule out any of the normal suspects for things that could be on the bottom of your foot. You know, a foot doctor would be familiar with foot things before we went to like a skin issue. So he's like, here, I'm gonna recommend you to a foot doctor. And he's like, we're familiar with them, and they worked with children before, specifically, because Marceline's like not even 2, you know, she's not even at this point, she was like not even a year and a half. So I was like, okay, that's wonderful. Just like, I will see anybody that you think. So he takes down my information because he's gonna like immediately give it to the foot doctor people so that she could see him like very soon. So I think a day went by. So I think, oh, okay, never mind. The foot specialist called me the next day and to schedule an appointment for Marceline. I thought a day had gone by. I'm looking at my notes. I had written down everything. Yeah, so this May 2nd, the foot specialist called me to schedule in Marceline. And they were like, okay, yeah, we could see her. And I was like, please, like, as soon as possible. Because, like, at this point, we're just going through Band-Aids because her foot is looking the same. It's still the same, like hole in her foot, and she's just bleeding. Oh yeah, how was she at this point? I think she was more or less okay. Her mood didn't seem to be any different than what it had been before. I think she was just walking on her tippy toes, I think, on that foot for most of the story. Marceline was more or less okay. She hated all these doctor appointments. Definitely, like, after it was like bleeding like this, she was walking like on her tippy toes, which is so sad to see. So yeah, second specialist calls. So the 3rd, May 3rd, we see the specialist. So he takes a look at it, and he thinks that it is a blood vessel that popped out of her foot. Now it cannot heal, which apparently is common in babies. I think he specifically said that the term is hemangioma. I'll put the text up here, because it's common in babies that it's sort of like a birthmark for them, where it's like a blood vessel or something that pokes out of the skin, but usually it goes away on its own. From what I can look up, usually it's like just like a birthmark sort of thing, and it's just like common in babies. So she might have had this spot under her foot like this like whole time, or like, you know, ever since she was like baby, like newborn maybe, and it's just like slowly got irritated as to, because she's been walking since she was a year old, and so this happened like a couple months after she started walking. So maybe it's always been there, and it just slowly got more irritated, that like blood vessel, until eventually it popped out of the skin, and it's been like this hole in her foot. You know, that could also be the thing. Oh, and before he said this, he x-rayed her foot to make sure there was no foreign body, no piece of rock, no piece of glass. It's just anything that she could have stepped on. He x-rayed her. There was nothing he could see. And so there was like this really cool x-ray machine that like specifically x-rayed her foot. She hated it, but she was a trooper this whole time. You know, like if you're bleeding that much, of course you're gonna be in pain. So I felt so bad for her for all these appointments. But they needed to look at her foot, and that was the only way they could get better. But okay, with it being a blood vessel, he thought the best thing were to see if he could cauterize it with acid, and that way it would make the blood vessel thing shrivel up and sort of like die and like fall off. That way that her skin can finally go around the wound and heal. So that's what he thought to do. So that day, May 3rd, he got acid like on like a Q-tip like thing, and like, okay, I'm adding the noise. It did not make a noise. It's just like acid, and like to burn her foot. And she hated it. It was like, of course, surely it was very painful. And it was this whole thing. Like I had to hold her down, and I had my cousin Amelia there too, and she was like distracting her with these toys. It was this whole thing. And so he wrapped it up with like a wrap and some gauze, and he said to come back, I think within a week, and to take a look at it again, and hopefully it was like gonna be better. So I think that would be the 9th. So the 9th, we go back to see the foot doctor. We had really just like kept it in the wrap as long as we could, and then put these really good quality band-aids on it to cover it up. Still giving her baths and stuff. I don't have it written down what it looked like, because I think this was right around the time that Chris and I took our Disneyland trip. So I think basically the whole first week that her foot was healing from the acid, Chris and I were gone, and she was in the care of my mother-in-law and then my parents. So I can't tell you exactly how it looked like then, but by the time that we came back and we took her to the follow-up appointment with the foot doctor, her foot was still bleeding like a tiny bit. Of course, before it was like just bleeding kind of constantly, which is like no good. It was still bleeding like a tiny bit, just a little bit of blood still showing up on band-aids, and even when we went to go see him on the 9th, it was bleeding a little bit. And so he said, okay, I'm going to do the acid treatment again, and hopefully this will finally kill it, and to come back in 2 weeks is what he said. So okay, the 9th, acid treatment and Christian was there, so we were able to hold her down. It was, of course, she hated it. It was awful. So the 11th, so it was only like 2 days after that appointment, we noticed that it was starting to release pus. So like clear water looking pus. We're like, oh no. So my first instinct was, oh, let's get her back to the foot doctor immediately, because I don't think they're supposed to be doing this. Like, I think it's infected. Because that's usually what pus means. But the next day, I think the 11th must have been a Saturday, either a Friday or a Saturday, like that night. And so the 13th, that Monday, which has been the soonest that I could have called the foot doctor or anybody, she was scheduled to see her pediatrician, it was her regular checkup. So I was like, okay, well, it's such an early appointment too, like 8 a.m. or something, like even before the foot doctor's office was going to be open. So I was like, okay, we'll take her to see the pediatrician. We'll show her the foot with the pus. then after the appointment, I'll call up the foot doctor to get to be seen. I was like, awesome. Because that was literally like the quickest series of events that could have happened. And so I think that was like, that must have been Mother's Day weekend too. So like, oh, at Mother's Day, she kept sitting down, like we were hanging out at my parents' house, like doing Mother's Day stuff, and she kept sitting down on the ground, like out of nowhere, I think because her foot was bugging her, and walking on her tiptoes and stuff. Like I think people were starting to tell me, like I even think my nana was like she's walking on her tiptoes, is something wrong? And I'm like, yeah, she's got this whole thing with her foot, we're trying to resolve it, she's seeing like a specialist and everything. So it was noticeable to other people as well, even people I hadn't told about the whole foot situation. So yeah, 13th, we see her pediatrician, and her pediatrician's like, oh, how's it going? And we're like, she's got this wound in her foot and now it's pussing, and she's like, ah. So her first instinct was to swab the pus from Marceline's foot and to send it to the lab to test to see what sort of infection it is, or if it was infected, and then to give her antibiotics. So prescribed her antibiotics for the foot infection, and she did swab it. So after the appointment, I called up the foot doctor, was like, hi, can she go back in to see him as soon as possible? Because I think it's infected, and there's something, he needs to look at it basically. And they're like, okay, can you come in right now? I was like, okay. So we drove right over there immediately after. We went to go see him. And he said, the foot doctor said that he didn't think it was infected, that was just what was supposed to happen, because what it looked like, it was, I do have a photo of it, but I think it's too gross to show on YouTube. But it was like the circle, it was like a big old circle, like maybe that big, around the spot where it was bleeding. The skin around it was like starting to leave her foot. And so under the skin was where the pus was coming from. So it was like bubbling, and what I think was happening was that the skin, that's where he put the acid, and that skin was dying, and flaking off, kind of like when you go to the pool and like your skin is like rubbery and like the dead skin starts like peeling off of you, kind of like that, which I think is good. That means that like something is dying, like the acid treatment was like, it was like killing at least the skin around that area. I'm not too sure if it was like not an obvious like example that it was working on the actual like blood vessel that he thought. Yeah, but you still don't want pus coming out of it though. But he was like, I don't think it's infected. But what he did, because we came in and it was like this big old thing, what he did was he cut off that dead skin from her foot, like with like little surgical scissors, and then he put stitches on the blood vessel. So I think by this point, the skin around the blood vessel was like dying and falling off, so that spot where it was the blood vessel was more prominent. So he just got a couple stitches and stitched at it, and then wrapped her whole foot up again, just like he did the other time with like the gauze and the wrap. And this time he said to keep that wrap on as long as we could, and to come back in like 3 days, like at the end of the week. So we're like, okay. So, and it was this whole thing. So we were like, okay, take it very seriously. And we're like, okay, how do we battle baths with her now that she has this wrap on her foot, and we want to keep it on there, but we didn't want to soak it in a bath? So I, like mother of the year over here, me, I put on a bathing suit, and then I got in the shower with Marceline, keeping the foot away from the water, and then I just showered her. She was on my lap. I'm in a swimsuit. She's on my lap, and I just showered her. She didn't like it those 3 days. Maybe it was 2 baths, so I don't know, like two or three baths where I showered her like that. So yeah, the 16th we went back. So 3 days later, we went back to the podiatrist, and he basically just unwrapped her foot from the wrap. It's like a little gross by that point. And we could even see that the spot was nice and dark. Nice and dark spot. Slapped a bandaid on it and said to come back next week. And if the stitches that he stitched 3 days before do not fall off on their own, then he's going to remove it by that point. Like he'll do what he can to remove the stitches. We're like, okay, awesome. And then that night, we went to, you know, get her ready for her bath. We took the band-aid off and the stitches just fell off. And like, it was like the stitches and then the little blood vessel just like, boop, just popped right off her foot with the band-aid. It was like, oh, there it is. There's the cause of all the blood and all the appointments. Could keep in mind, every single appointment, like for the urgent care, pediatrician, and the foot doctor, the podiatrist, it was like a copay of like $35 at least. So like, count how many appointments that I told you about, and every single appointment was like $35. So this tiny little blood vessel that I was holding in my hand, it was so tiny, was like the cost like hundreds of dollars. Like, oh, I mean, maybe not hundreds of dollars. Maybe, I think by the end, maybe like $200. But still, like, oh my gosh. There it was. And so by that point, it looked basically healed up. Like it was just like a circle around her foot with like new skin, you know, growing through, you know, because he removed like the extra skin stuff, and a tiny little dot in the middle that you could see was where that blood vessel thing popped out. Yeah, and then ever since then she's been good, and we did take her to the week, you know, checkup appointment later, which he was ready to remove, you know, the stitches, but they had fallen off already.
Almost like ballet for grandpa.
Yeah, she got tap shoes on. I wanted to just cancel the appointment. I was like, okay, well, it did what he said he was gonna do, and it's healing now. You know, a week later, I was like, I think we just canceled the appointment. But my parents were, you know, I strung along for all this, gave him all the updates about her foot and everything. They were like, no, still go to the appointment so he could see it. And I was like, okay, well, that's just, so it was $35 just for him to give me a thumbs up and be like, yep, there it is. The blood vessel fell out with the stitches. You know, hopefully I never see you again. But he did say that this could happen again, which I was like, what? Like, maybe this is just like a condition that she could develop where maybe her blood vessels can just pop out of her skin. I don't know. But as of right now, her foot, she's walking around just fine. Don't worry. She even ran so fast the other day at my parents' house that she fell and hit her head on the floor. It was this big old thing. So that's how fast she's running now. So that foot is not holding her back at all. But yeah, right now it just looks like a spot, like maybe that big. Maybe her foot is really tiny, so maybe that big of new skin, you know, so it's like pink, you know, like pink new skin, kind of like when you get like a boo-boo and the new skin is growing back. It's like rather pink, you know, it's like kind of like not scabby, but you know, like after you have a scab and it falls off and that new skin is like pinkish, that's what it looks like. And then you can see the tiny little dot in the middle where the blood vessel was. Yeah, she's all good, it's all healed. But yeah, that's like so weird. I guess we'll have to be on the lookout for that now, as I don't know. But yeah, it was this whole thing, just a lot of blood, and yeah, so seeing like a hole on the bottom of her foot was like a little scary. Yeah, especially that one night with the urgent care, just like you want to do everything, and she was like in pain every time we were messing with it. All those appointments, it was just so, yeah, it's so painful to see her in that much pain. But she's okay now. And I think that's why I like waited till like June to talk about this, while this like was basically resolved at the end of May. Like, it's not that big of a deal. It's not like, you know, she has like some sort of condition or something weird that I have to like really explain. Like her helmet, you know, their helmet was like a big old thing. You don't see babies with helmets all the time. So you might need like an explanation to like why she had to wear a helmet. If you watched this far, thank you so much for listening. You must really care about me and my baby girl, and I really appreciate you for caring. I was like, does anybody really care about my baby's foot? Do I have to make a whole video about it? I don't know. I feel like it was a whole roller coaster of a ride. Plus, I hopefully I talked fast enough that I got the information to you nice and speedy quick. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed me telling you this story. Please make sure to like this video if you did. It really helps me out. and to subscribe for more stories about me and my baby girl Marceline, and better stories than, you know, a wound on the bottom of her foot as well. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.